What's good, everyone? We are back with the Spider-Man No Way Home review. I'm your host, Pranav Sriraman, and I'm joined by my co-host, Shyam Punnachalil. Shyam, how are you doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
I'm doing great. I watched the movie. It lived up to the hype. It might have even surpassed my expectations. So, with that being said, before we get right into it, make sure you subscribe to MHS News Publications on YouTube for all the best content regarding Marquette High School and the latest news. But getting right into it, Sham, what were your first takeaways from watching the movie? Did it meet your expectations? Did it surpass them? What were your initial thoughts after you watched the final end credit scene?
Yeah, it definitely surpassed it for me. I really liked how all three Spider-Men were in the movie, and it wasn't really predictable. It was actually pretty unpredictable, and that's something that I like to see because I wasn't watching the movie expecting to see what I would think. There was always something surprising, uh, and that's something I like to see in movies, especially in superhero movies where there's so much action. And I really appreciated that. I also liked how they brought back the older villains. I know that was something that was confirmed a while ago, but it was just cool to see them reimagine and play their characters and their roles again. And that was definitely satisfying to see.
Right, and this is the No Way Home review. So if you're watching this right now, I'm assuming you've watched the movie. But in case you haven't, spoiler alert, my favorite part was when Ned had magic powers, apparently, which is a storyline to follow, moving into the future of the MCU. But anyways, Ned has magic powers, and it's really strange to me because people don't this isn't talked about enough in my opinion, but Ned having magic powers and being able to create a portal so quickly without any experience is pretty weird due to the fact that Doctor Strange, who was the Sorcerer Supreme, when he first started his journey towards becoming a sorcerer, he struggled. Off the camera, you were talking about how you just watched Doctor Strange 1 again. You saw how he went through that struggle of really creating portals and using his magic effectively, but we saw Ned um, use magic with quite effectiveness super quickly. Was that a strange point for you and something to look out for moving forward?
Yeah, in comparison to like between Ned and Doctor Strange, it was actually cool to see how Ned was able to do it in a much faster and simple way. I know Doctor Strange had a lot of issues doing that at first because he was way too selfish while he was at Kamartaj, and he was also just having issues blocking out annoyances with his hands. Because I know in that movie, the whole point of him going to Kamartaj and learning the ways of the Sorcerer Supreme is because he gets into a car crash and his hands get screwed over because, well, in that car crash, he experienced a lot of nerve damage, and so it was actually cool to see how Ned was able to do it with such ease because I guess he was open to thinking, whereas with Doctor Strange, he wasn't really open to thinking at that time.
Right, and obviously I was talking about Ned's magic, and the coolest part with Ned's magic was the fact that not just once, but twice in a row, he brought back not only Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man from the Sony Spider-Man universe, but he also brought back Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man from the original Spider-Man universe. I thought that moment was really cool. I know I was in the theaters just like personally in that point, everyone was cheering. It was a pretty climactic moment of the movie, even though it wasn't like the peak of the movie. It was still like a legendary moment, I would say, just to see those two actors returning. They didn't tease that at all. Both actors did such a good job at hiding the fact that they were in the movie. Marvel did a good job not promoting them, and then they happened to be in the movie. So that was really cool to see. I haven't really seen anything like that be done before. Um, Except Star Wars did it with Luke Skywalker for The Force Awakens, but that was only for like 10 seconds of the movie. So it wasn't
Yeah,
really it wasn't really that impacting combined with the fact that the movie wasn't very good, and this movie happened to be really good, so that part made me really happy personally.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to what your reaction was when Andrew and Toby appeared?
Yeah, so I also popped off like a lot of other people. It was cool to see them come back and reprise their roles as Spider-Man, especially for Andrew Garfield because Sony did not handle his two movies very well. They were, in my opinion, they were pretty bad for the most part because for me, they just didn't take. It feels like they didn't really take it with any seriousness involved.
I agree.
Um, yeah, so it was cool to see, Andrew Garfield come back and play Spider-Man again because he definitely made an impact. It was actually really cool seeing him do his things again, and it didn't feel forced either, which is something I'd also like to add with both Toby and Andrew. It didn't feel forced to put both of them back in with Tom Holland Spider-Man. It just felt natural, and I really like that.
Right. So we have touched on what we liked about the movie. Obviously, we both loved all three Spider-Man coming back. We love the return of the new villains. But let's talk about the plot. Let's talk about the plot here for a second. A lot of people are saying this movie had a somewhat an underwhelming plot, and it was just a bunch of fan service. I tend to disagree with that line of logic. There was a ton of fan service because that's what this movie really was about. But at the end of the day, I think the plot was pretty consistent. So if anyone just needs a quick debrief of the plot. Anyway, so Peter gets exposed for being Spider-Man, and then he asks Doctor Strange for everyone in the world to forget that he was Spider-Man, and then in doing so, he messed up the spell repeatedly. All the multiverse villains and all the multiverse Spider-Mans appear and cause chaos in his world. Kill his Aunt May. In the process when he was trying to help them out. And then that's pretty much the plot of the movie, trying to cure those villains and send them back to their home world. So in regards to that, I have a question for you. Why didn't Peter just ask Doctor Strange for the world to forget who Mysterio was? Wouldn't that be just so much easier in this process?
I don't know why he didn't do that. I think that's actually a good point to make. I feel like maybe uh, if that were to happen, maybe Mysterio would have just done the same things again, and the people might not know that Mysterio was Quentin Beck. But that's also hard to say because when Mysterio has revealed his identity, and he did it without any issues, he didn't really feel uncomfortable with that. So that is weird. I think he could have done that. I don't know because it's also one of those things where, like I said earlier, even if that were to happen, I feel like Quentin Beck still. I mean, he still hated Tony Stark in Far From Home, and he wanted to simply just achieve his dreams with. I think he wanted to continue his project with. I think it was augmented reality, where
Right.
he could create illusions and just create his own world with that. So I don't know if Mysterio's goals would change, but I do think it's something that if that were to happen, I wonder how that would impact the story.
Right. And another talking point, which I found kind of weird, and you can clarify if I'm wrong, by the way.
Okay.
I want to know. So at the end of Spider-Man 1, when Norman Osborn was killed by his own glider, he told Peter, don't tell Harry that he was the Green Goblin, right?
Yeah.
At that point, in Spider-Man No Way Home, I found it really weird that Doc Ock knew that Norman Osborn was a Green Goblin, even though that information never really came out publicly. I thought that was an interesting plot hole. Did you notice that? Or like on the scene of the bridge, he was like Norman, or he said
Yeah.
either
Yeah.
said Norman or Osborn. Did you notice that? And is there anything to say to that? Like, how did he possibly know? I that yet again, I don't know if this information was disclosed to the public. He didn't want Harry to know, and I'm guessing if Harry didn't know, the public didn't know. So, what were your takeaways from that scene?
Actually, when I think about it, I think it was public, possibly, I don't know, because I think in Spider-Man 3, Harry knew that the Green Goblin
Oh yeah, of course he
was,
did.
yeah. So then, um, as for
It,
Doc Ock, I don't know if how he knew because there's also another plot hole um, that uh, arose from that situation where people were confused as to how Electro was even in this movie because he didn't really know that Spider-Man was Peter Parker. And the whole idea of this movie was that the villains who knew Peter Parker came into the
yes.
MCU.
And another thing is Doctor Strange said all the villains died fighting Peter Parker. Flint Marko didn't die fighting Peter
Yeah.
Parker, Sandman. Lizard didn't die fighting Peter Parker, Sandman. Also, Lizard was there for absolutely no reason. He did nothing in the movie, but
Yeah.
that's another talking point we can get into. But Lizard did absolutely nothing. And then and then what's his name? Electro. Electro didn't know Peter was Spider-Man, and he didn't die fighting Spider-Man. So I thought that was a massive plot hole within the movie. But moving on from the villains, what were your takeaways from Aunt May's death? Do you think this pushes Peter in? Because in the preview, we talked about how we wanted to see him be a darker version of Peter. Um, and do you think this could be the death that pushes him? We saw that he almost killed Green Goblin out of anger. Do you think that without the guidance of Toby and Andrew Spider-Man, that he can go into that version of darkness, like they did?
Yeah, I was actually thinking that if he had killed Green Goblin, he would have pretty much ruined one of the, well, not ruined, but he would have messed up a timeline, because he's not supposed to die in another universe. He's supposed to die in Toby's universe, which is what Doctor Strange made clear. Like they are supposed to go back to their universes so they can die, and that's how Doctor Strange was explaining that to Peter. Um, and when it comes to how that impacted the entire story, I think Aunt May's death did really hurt Peter in the sense that he was really challenged because he can't rely on Aunt May, and because of her death, that definitely pushed him to the brink of almost killing Green Goblin. And so I do think it was definitely like an impact that could have changed an entire universe.
Right. And to our final point of this podcast, Shyam, what would you rate the movie on a scale of 10?
I'd say I would rate it like a 9 out of 10. I think the only thing I probably didn't like about it was the lizard or Electro, either or. I feel like there were some parts with those villains I just didn't really like, especially how Lizard, like you mentioned earlier, he didn't really do much at all, and I mean he was a potent villain in the Amazing Spider-Man, the first Amazing Spider-Man movie, and it kind of sucks how he was pretty cool in that movie. I liked him, and he didn't really do much here. It was really just the Green Goblin and Doc Ock show.
Right. And for me personally, I would give this movie an 8.5 out of 10 on the second review. I had a little bit of problems with the plot holes, and I did think the plot could have been a little bit better. But at that point, you'd be nitpicking. I would give it a strong 8.5, probably boost it up to a 9 out of 10, like you. I thought it was a great movie overall. Great fan service. Great that they brought the other actors back. Overall, a good plot. And it sets up the Spider-Man universe and the MCU perfectly heading into the future. But Sham, thank you, as always, for coming on and doing this with me. For all the next movie content, we will be right here. But until next time, peace.